In June 2016, Greg Newark of theweekendweird.com was contacted by a fan regarding a terrifying experience he had while camping in the mountains in southern New York. According to the witness, it was early June 2016. He and two friends, Dan and Jamie, had set off for an area in the mountain in an off-road track off the main road. They were quite deep in the woods. While not totally sure if the camping was allowed, the man guessed by the sheer number of fire pits found that people did it anyway. The day in question they had arrived, it was late afternoon. They managed to set up their tent and get a fire going. They cracked open a couple of beers and sat around talking until the sun went down. Not long after, something strange occurred. Quote, "We all looked at each other because the woods got real quiet. You couldn't even hear crickets. Everything just went dead quiet. It felt like there was a lightning storm coming because you could feel the static in the air and all the hair on the back of my neck stood up," unquote. As they sat there, taking it all in, something even more bizarre would grab their attention. One of the friends, Jamie, noted that it felt like the air around them was humming. Quote, "All of a sudden there was a real deep bass noise, and this bright light in the distance that flashed up and lit up the whole woods. It looked like the light when a real big firework explodes for the first few seconds, but it lasted for probably a minute before it split up into 3 or 4 other lights and shot back down into the trees," unquote. The three friends could see the lights glowing out in the woods, and then there was a big gust of wind, and then the lights disappeared. The witness noted that it smelled as though it just rained, even though it hadn't. Confused, the men sat waiting to see what would happen next. When nothing did, they reasoned amongst themselves that the light they saw was probably something natural, namely a meteor or something along that line. Brushing it off, they returned to their chat. At around 2 a.m., they decided to turn in for the night. The witness and Jamie headed for the tent while Dan decided he was going to sleep outside by the fire. Within an hour, Dan was in the tent, shaking the guys awake. He told them that he saw something about 50 feet from the fire standing on 2 legs, bobbing back and forth as if it was trying to get a better look at him. He assumed that it was a bear, but wasn't quite sure. As he sat talking, the men suddenly heard a loud scream. It sounded nothing like they'd ever heard before. Quote, "It sounded like a pig being slaughtered, but deeper, and so loud it made your ears ring." Next thing I remember was hearing 3 or 4 more things come running toward the campsite, and the embers from the fire kicking up and landing on the tent. The things, or creatures, or whatever they were, kept running up to the tent and grunting and running back into the woods. Every once in a while, one of them would scream again and pull on one of the tent poles, dragging the whole tent a foot or 2. The tent was collapsing on one side, and we didn't know what else to do, so we just started screaming as loud as we could, unquote. After about a minute, everything went quiet again. Totally spooked at this point and fearing for their lives, they decided to make a break for it, charging out of their tent towards their truck. Once safely inside the vehicle, they locked the doors and started it up. They began making their way out of the area. It was then, in the headlights of their vehicle, they observed something standing in the road. Quote, "I told Jamie to gun it, and the thing straightened up and puffed up its chest. It must have been 8 feet tall, had dark gray hair all over its body except the front. That hair was white or yellow around the chest. Its face looked kind of like a dog, but not really. I know what Bigfoot looks like, and this was way different. It didn't even move when we drove at it. We had to swerve around it or we would have run right over it," unquote. The three friends drove back down the mountain and parked at a gas company parking lot. They had thought about going to the cops about what had happened, but the fact that they were camping in a spot they weren't supposed to be and the possibility they could get nailed for a DUI, as they were all quite inebriated, made them consider against it. They decided to wait up until morning when they had sobered up. When they drove back up to the spot to get their stuff, upon arriving, discovered it was gone. Everything was gone. No tent, no cooler, no nothing. Upon returning home, they told a few people about what they saw, although most people just scoffed at them, assuming that the booze had caused them to hallucinate what they saw. The author of the story is adamant that it happened, even offering to take Newark up to the spot himself. Quote, "If you want to come up and check it out, I'll take you right to the place it happened. There's still tracks from where we peeled out and lots of big gashes in the dirt where the tent was, but nothing else. I don't know if it had anything to do with the lights we saw, but it was the weirdest damn thing any of us had ever experienced. That was no bear," unquote. Greg Newark examined the case and doesn't believe that it was an alcohol-induced hallucination. Quote, "First off, let's address the alcohol. Yes, it's easy to lean back and laugh about how a bunch of drunk dudes saw a monster, But when was the last time you hallucinated from drinking beer? I'm not saying they couldn't be mistaken, just that I doubt alcohol can make three people all hallucinate a physical attack by big hairy monsters, unquote. He also wondered if the lights in the Dogmen, and no doubt the creature the witness described definitely sounds like a Dogman, were somehow connected. The case sounds strangely similar to the Palmyra, Pennsylvania events depicted on an episode of Paranormal Witness, in which the sighting of strange lights in the woods were followed by a sighting of a group of aggressive, upright walking canines. In another case, a man named Sean recalled a bizarre encounter he had, also involving a strange light and possible Dogmen. The question is, was it real? The incident occurred when he was 13. He has never been able to explain what happened. Between the ages of 11 and 13, he would occasionally sleepwalk, usually ending up in his backyard or various parts of his home. It became a serious problem as he, on a few occasions, woke up partway down the street. It was during one of these sleepwalking episodes that something very strange happened. Sean recalled that, at the time, it was snowing pretty heavy. He had gone to bed and dreamt that he had woken up. He strolled through the house, went out the front door, down the steps, and to the end of the driveway. Quote, at that point, it stopped snowing and a moon came out through the clouds. And I remember looking up at the moon and just staring at it for the longest time. Looking across the road right after that and seeing some type of dark shape coming toward me. At that point, at least in my mind, it was a dream. Everything kind of went fuzzy, unquote. When Sean woke up, he was back in his bed. He was barefoot. His feet were blue and freezing cold. His pant legs were noticeably wet as well. He assumed that he had done it again, sleepwalked in the night, although apparently this time he had returned to bed. He shrugged it off and began to get ready to catch the school bus. Quote, as I'm walking down the steps, I see bare footprints in the snow down the driveway, and at the end of the driveway, I saw enormous. To me, it looked like big dog prints around my feet. It didn't scare me, but it kind of struck me, and over the years it really played heavy on my mind, unquote. Is it possible that Sean was actually abducted that night? Was the moon he thought he saw actually something else? What of the dark shape that came at him? Was it what created the large dog prints? Was this experience a one-off, or was it connected to a sleepwalking problem? Or was it all merely a dream? Quote, it keeps going back to that moment, and I've never really gotten an answer as to what happened to me. There weren't a whole lot of prints. Remember, they were as big as my hand at the time, unquote. I made a video about dog men or werewolf type creatures being seen on UFOs. I made a whole video about it, so it doesn't surprise me. The Paranormal Witness episode, which featured a family harassed by an aggressive pack of wolves, or dogmen, sorry, kind of following the UFO sighting, or a sighting of a light in the woods. It really kind of like makes me wonder if there is some kind of a connection between dogmen and UFOs. I don't know.